Hi, my name is Mona Fazakas, and this is my 415 course project presentation. I'm going to start with some background information on the research topic I have chosen. Autism spectrum disorder is characterized by social interaction and communication disturbances, as well as restricted and repetitive behaviors. Through understanding the main symptomology of the disorder, it can be understood how the experience of caring for a child with ASD impacts the parent's mental health. Many parents of children with autism report increased stresses due to the unique caregiving challenges associated with raising their children. The literature indicates that caregivers of children with ASD often experience impaired mental health, increased anxiety and depression, a poor quality of life and well-being, and higher levels of stress compared to caregivers of typically developing children and caregivers of children with other childhood disorders like Down syndrome and/or ADHD. The reason I've chosen this topic is based on my own personal experiences. Over the summer, I worked at the Center for Autism Services and worked with children with ASD and their families at a summer camp. I had interactions with the parents at drop-off and saw how news of their child's behavior that day, good or bad, impacted them. I thought it would be interesting to study what the experiences of these parents are because of this. Now I will move on to my literature review section, in which I will detail research findings that support my research question. The first source I'm using is a paper titled Mother's Experiences and Challenges Raising a Child with Autism Spectrum Disorder, a Qualitative Study. The aim of the study was to investigate the lived experiences of mothers of children with ASD in Greece. A convenient sample of 9 mothers of children with ASD were recruited and engaged in semi-structured interviews. Interpretive phenomenological analysis was used to analyze the transcript of these interviews. After this analysis, 3 interconnected themes emerged. These themes were stated as being emotional burden, family burden, and social burden. Within these themes, the sense of burden, distress, and vulnerability experienced by the mothers was found. The findings provide valuable understanding of the experiences of mothers raising children with ASD, so it is directly relevant to my research question. Although I will be looking at both mothers and fathers in my study, these findings are still important for informing my research. The second source I'm using is a paper titled Social Support and Coping Strategies of Parents Raising a Child with Autism Spectrum Disorder. This study set out to explore the psychological and social needs of parents within the same family unit raising a child with ASD. Parents attending an early intervention center completed a semi-structured interview investigating their experiences. The framework method, which involved drawing themes from the data and then grouping these themes into broader categories, was used for the analysis. In both genders, strategies like problem-focused coping strategies, engaging in me-time activities, and disengaging from a stressor were all seen to help cope. In mothers specifically, emotion-focused strategies and accessing social support for emotional and practical needs were more common. The author suggests that the presence of traditional gender roles were a potentially significant factor in understanding how mothers and fathers adopt different types of coping strategies. This study is relevant to my research question because I'm looking into the experiences felt by parents of children with ASD, and this article provides important information on how parents cope with the stress they feel from raising their child. The way an individual copes with stressors in their life and whether these coping strategies are successful can impact their mental health, so it is important to understand these different mechanisms. My research question is unique to these 2 studies I've described because it looks at both mothers and fathers. As well, I'm not specifically looking at the coping mechanisms seen in these parents, but I'm examining their overall experiences, which may include descriptions of these coping mechanisms. By looking at this previous research, I was able to develop my own research question. My research question is, what are the experiences associated with mental health for adults raising children with autism spectrum disorder? This study will involve collecting media data through the internet that involves videos which describe parents' experiences raising children with autism. After these videos are transcribed, a narrative analysis will be performed to gather themes and conclusions from the data. Next, I will describe my methods. In this study, I will use narrative analysis, which is suited to small sample sizes. Because of this, I'm using a sample size of 4. My sampling method will involve conducting a media data search through YouTube for TED Talks that can be used in my study and that follow the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The type of data I am collecting in this study is media data. I will look at videos such as TED Talks and analyze the narratives being told. This will allow me to gain insight into how these narratives are structured, which fits into the type of analysis I will be conducting on the data. I will initially transcribe the videos in a way that all meaning is retained. Through the process of analysis, I will retranscribe the data into a table in order to identify elements of Labov's structural narrative analysis model within the narrative. There are some concerns regarding the collection of media data that need to be addressed. When collecting this data, I need to define specific parameters because of the huge amount of different videos out there. The exclusion and inclusion criteria will help with this. As well, there is an ethical concern regarding if the information I will be accessing is in the public domain. Since all the videos I will be using have been uploaded to YouTube, which is a free public site, this should not be a concern for my project. The inclusion criteria for my data is that the topic of the video must be ASD and must be from the parent's perspective. As well, all of the videos must be a similar length to help ensure the transcription process goes smoothly. The exclusion criteria for my data is the time of recording. The videos must be recent to better reflect the experiences of parents in recent years. As well, the video must be in English so I can transcribe and analyze the narratives present. The type of analysis I will be doing is a structural narrative analysis. Labov's model of structural narrative analysis centers on how narratives are organized. By breaking down the narrative into different components, the structure can be analyzed in relation to the content. This method of narrative analysis is not as much concerned with the overall themes, but more on how the content is organized. Narrative analysis has a specific philosophical background that directly informs how the analysis is carried out. It combines modernist interest in description and interpretation with postmodernist interest in ensuring that participant representation and agency are central. When subjective meaning making becomes the focus of research, as it is in narrative analysis, links between identity construction and the action of the storyteller can be made. It explores the stories told by people to allow the researcher to understand how they make meaning out of their experiences. Narrative analysis focuses on meaning making by having the object of investigation be the story being told by the participant or the narrator. Individuals tend to choose the most pertinent features to them from something they've experienced when constructing their account. They make sense of the events by adding interpretive elements, which allows them to construct a coherent narrative. There are 7 steps that I will follow when conducting my narrative analysis. These steps are formulating a research question, data collection, analysis and interpretation, coding the narrative, analytical comments, recontextualizing the narrative, and a write-up of the analysis. I will describe the details of these steps and how they relate to my research question in the next slides. The first step in narrative analysis is formulating a research question. Research questions in this type of analysis usually reflect a need to examine how narrators make sense of themselves, their life, and their experiences. Individuals often construct stories after changes or disruptions to their lives to help them make sense and bring meaning to these experiences. These questions are well suited to exploration of identity because they encourage personal reflection and meaning making in an individual's life. These questions are also open and broad and have an equal focus both on the topic they are investigating and how the narrative is being told. My research question is, what are the experiences associated with mental health for adults raising children with autism spectrum disorder? This question directly focuses on the life and experiences of parents as well as how they construct narratives surrounding the topic. By ensuring my question reflects the values of narrative analysis, I can move on to the next step. The second step in the process is data collection. In this step, I will search for media data that fits the inclusion and exclusion criteria that I described in an earlier slide. This will involve searching the internet for relevant videos. Once this media data is collected, I will convert the videos into a transcript, so I will be able to analyze them. In this transcription process, it is important that I ensure all meaning is retained to allow for a better analysis. As stated in the textbook, it is imperative that narrative analysts seek to prepare a verbatim transcript, and when making side notes of laughs, pauses, or hesitations, they are noted in a way that avoids putting unintended meanings into the data. The third step in the process is the analysis and interpretation of the data. This step of the structural narrative analysis closely examines how the different parts in the structure of the narrative function in relation to each other and in how the story of the event is told. Narratives within a single transcript can be identified by looking for the conventional story form of a beginning, a middle, and an end within the telling of the events. Because of this, understanding the temporal ordering of events is important to understanding the narrative. I will be able to look for keywords such as and as well as and then, which will help in alerting me to the possible presence of a sequence of events that may constitute a narrative. The fourth step in the process is coding the narrative. After I identify the narratives within the transcript, through recognizing the structural elements that compose these narratives, I will be able to understand the intended meaning within the stories. There are identifiable elements described in LabOp's model that appear in most narratives, such as abstract, orientation, complicating action, evaluation, resolution, and coda. Using these elements, I can retranscribe the data into a table that shows what components of the narrative fit into each of these elements. By doing this, the meaning of events and experiences that the participants have brought to the telling of the story will become clear and aid in the next steps of analysis. The fifth step in the process is writing analytical comments. The contents of these analytical notes describe the function that each element plays in constructing each story. They can also be made about observations concerning the presence, absence, repetition, and interruption of elements within the narratives. Through this process, I will keep my research question in mind, as that will directly inform the type of observations and comments I find within the data. Making these comments will allow me to gain further immersion in the details of the stories. This immersion will allow me to develop a detailed understanding of the function of each element and how these elements relate to each other, and what this suggests about the overall structure of the narrative. The sixth step in the process is recontextualizing the narratives. I will complete this step by returning to the entire data set and reading through it actively with the previous analysis at the top of mind. I will do this to ensure that the narratives are interpreted within the context of the data set. The seventh and final step is writing up the analysis. This write-up involves an account and interpretation of the participants' stories that addresses the research question. Narrative analysis is based on the uniqueness of meanings and stories, which means that after my analysis is finished, I may choose a select number of case studies to illustrate the key findings. It is essential that within this analysis, I include clear illustrations of the narratives themselves, and that the write-up is clearly linked to my research question, and in turn focuses on how the narratives inform the emerging understanding of meaning making within the context of the topic. As stated before, my research question is, what are the experiences associated with mental health for adults raising children with autism spectrum disorder? The methods I will use to address this question involve media data collection, transcription, and narrative analysis. These methods are all suited to answering this question and exploring this topic. Media data will allow me to analyze narratives, as videos like TED Talks involve an individual describing a narrative about their personal experiences and their perspective on that experience. Other forms of data collection, like focus groups or structured interviews, would not be suited for my research question. As well, my research question is focused on the specific experiences of parents whose children have ASD and how they understand their experiences, which makes narrative analysis useful and relevant to my topic. I think this is a very interesting and important topic to study because it could help to identify struggles parents face and ways to help these struggles. And here is my reference slide. Thanks so much for listening to my presentation.